we act like we're poor. We go around begging, not just children. We have leaders begging. We have adults begging. We have children begging because somebody told us we were poor. Everybody in the world sees that Africa is rich. Africa is one of the richest continents in the world. With all the prayers that Africans do every day, and all the churches, and all the mosques, and all the shrines, and all the temples, begging God to bless us, we blind ourselves to God having given us the biggest blessing and endowment of any other race on the face of this earth. We don't appreciate what God has done. I've often said, not being blasphemous, but if I was God, I would slap everybody that got down and prayed less than anything else. Being ungrateful for what I've given you. I've given you more than I've given anybody. And you're on your knees asking me for more, and you haven't used what I've given you. Not only in the material wealth of our land, of our rivers, of our landscape, of the blue skies and the sunshine, but no human being on this earth is endowed with more human endowment and enrichment than the African. We have the greatest endowment and capacity of mind. We have the greatest endowment and capacity of spirit. We have the greatest endowment and capacity in our physical form, in our body. So what else can we ask God for? Other than to wake us up in the morning and do something with what He's given us. But as long as our minds have been robbed from us, and we've been seen, have been trained, and been educated to see ourselves in an image outside of ourselves, we'll be lost. So for some of us, the return was a plea that we can return back to the knowledge of ourselves. Return back to our own center of putting wealth on being an African. Return back to the center of our own soul of saying that you feel blessed to be an African. Not that you are cursed. Not that you would have to spend money on a cosmetic cream trying to make yourself white. Not that you spend money on cosmetics trying to change the texture of your hair. Not that you would spend money on fashion and form trying to look like somebody else's culture and taking off your own culture and not having pride in your own culture. Look at the brilliance of our chiefs and our landowners. Look at these colors. Look at the skill that it takes to weave this cloth. Look at the endowment of the symbols in there and the meaning of the enigma symbols. Who has a culture that rich? Who has an endowment that rich? But when your mind is robbed from you and you have no memory of who you are blind to what it is that you have. And we must take off those shackles from our eyes and begin to see value and beauty in ourselves. I came through an era of the 60s and the 70s when I was a student like you, and we would send great men and great women to try to wake us up from our sleep and our slumber. Because many black people in America, we hated Africa. When we were told we were from Africa, like somebody cursed and said, don't tell me I'm not from no Africa. You put Africa like they were cursed. Someone called you black, you were ready to fight. Don't call me black, I'm not black. Because someone had just cursed you. But then because God put a spirit of awakening on us, and we called it black empowerment, we had our artists that began to make songs, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. We began to have artists that make songs about sweet songs about Mother Africa and the beauty of Mother Africa. We started making dashikis. We even started taking curtains off of our mother's living room and sewing it to make dashikis, to get a material that had a print to it. We started making sandals. We started thinking about Mother Africa again. We started having pride in ourselves to wake us up. And so people got nervous with that. Talking about Africa. Africa started going through the independence movement herself in the year of 1960, 3 years after Ghana found her freedom, but the same year that Ghana became a republic. 30 African nations threw up colonial rule. 30 African nations said they didn't want to be under colonialism no more. They didn't want to be under Europeans no more. Just in 1960. But people got worried. That was just the beginning of a march towards liberation. That was the beginning of a march towards true emancipation and liberation. But it was an interruption. We didn't finish. Signing a piece of paper and legislation saying we're an independent nation was not enough. Making our own flag, having the Psalms to write our own anthem, making our own pledge of allegiance, it was not enough. We had to be able to go into all the millions of Africans on the African continent and away from the African continent and go inside the mind of the Africans to reshape our minds back into being Africans all over again. Because just like you were made to take on a European name in order to be able to go to church or register to school, it wasn't just the European name you had to take on because they said culture wasn't good enough, you had to be kidding. Or Mosiah wasn't good enough, you had to be married. It wasn't just a name, it was changing your mind to get you to be a part of a process that would Europeanize you. So in order to be African in our value, in our word, we also need another process to reclaim our identity and reclaim our value. We can't have a full liberation and emancipation struggle without liberating the mind. In fact, that's what freedom means. Free means to liberate, and dome means the mind. So free dome means liberating the mind. Freedom doesn't dog that you're going to put his meal in the corner over there. And you train that dog to stay in the yard and don't go out the yard. You can begin with whipping them. You can begin by walking them on a chain. But there comes a day you don't. Black is not a nation. Black is not an ethnic group. Black is not an identity. Negroes neither the same, but under colonialism and slavery, they remade us into new people. People outside don't know what a Bantu is. People outside don't know what an Ashanti is. They don't know what a Nahwe is, a Yoruba is, a Igbo is. They don't even know, they just know African. And the world just learned that there's Africans and Africas, the dark continents of jungle. They didn't respect our culture. They didn't respect our language. They never know that we're a people that have ethnic groups, that have cultures, have nations, have communities, have societies. So therefore the world was not taught to respect. And so we even also learn that ourselves, not to respect others. So we just look at ourselves. If you don't speak my language, you don't come from my village, then you're not like me. The Europeans saw that division and he capitalized on that division and he drove a train through that and widened those divisions even further. But when we talk about today, PanAfricanism is a word that many of us don't understand. PanAfricanism has to be an ideology of African people thinking together as a people, working to solve our problems together as a people, and believing in ourselves as a people, and putting worth and value back in ourselves as a people. And we can't do that if we don't have no problem lying to each other, cheating each other, holding mediocrity as a standard of being African. That cannot work for us to be liberated as a people. So when we talk about the year of return or beyond the return, we're talking about a journey back into what it is to be African. Now, I have some books on my table, and I know what Gussie said, you're gonna understand this if you leave, that it ain't gonna happen like that. I just want to stir up our minds that when we have these great leaders and thinkers who've been sent to us, who've been struggling since the day we found ourselves in a struggle, many of them took time to write about our conditions and the possible solutions. Some of these authors and some of these books are unknown to us. And I simply wanted to just introduce some topics, but as students, because I realize some students are going to be here, I wanted you to actually see that there's some physical books that are available that you can actually read and research. Don't blame it on your teacher in your school if you don't have this book, I haven't read it, or you haven't learned your history. Because I don't know a teenager today that doesn't have a cell phone, doesn't have access to social media, and cannot look up stuff. But where do we put our attention when we Google something today? Are we Googling about our history? Are we Googling about a knowledge of ourselves? I want to paint a picture. In the 14th century, when Europeans began to travel down here to Africa, I want to talk about a scenario. I said that people told us we are poor, and we act out the part as if we are poor. And they don't remind us of our riches. See, if someone told you you was rich, and you didn't have no money, you have one or two questions. You say, wait, what is that person talking about? Or, where is my money? Because they say I'm rich, they must know something I don't know. But I don't have no money in my pocket. And last I checked and cleaned up my room, I didn't see no hidden box in there with no money. And so how could this person tell me that I'm rich and I have no money? But it means to ask a question, because someone in the world kept telling me Africans are rich, Africans are rich, and Africans are rich. Africans would start to ask the question, where's our money? And where's our riches? And you might end up coming to the conclusion, somebody must have robbed me. Because the last I seen, I can't find my money. So where's the thief? And where's the robber? Who took my money? So that picture I want to paint, how many of you have ever heard about a man called Mosiah? Somebody that said in our first session, but you students weren't here. How many of you heard about Mosiah? Have you heard about a man called Mosiah? Raise your hand. I'm talking to the students. I understand from your head history, you're history students.
Once the Master Musada, Abia Master Musada Monsa Dry.
All right. This is the work we got to do. That's why I bring it up. Mosiah, most recently in the last 2 to 3 years, have been circulating all throughout social media, all over again. The reason why his name is circulating is because they're saying he's the richest man that ever lived in history. They said he was richer than Bill Gates, richer than Donald Trump. Well, there's a lot of people richer than that. That's right. Yeah. Money can't make him rich. Anyway, they even say richer than King Solomon of the Bible. That's how far they go. The richest man that ever lived, not the richest man of his time, not the richest man of yesterday, but the richest man of all time. And guess where he was from? He's from West Africa. He was the king of Mali. You know, a lot of the current day Ghanaians, you know the pedigree, they say from ancient Ghana, Songhai, Mali, all of these migrations come down. This is your history, this is who you are. Now, can you imagine that your king was the richest king in all the world that ever lived to this day? And that he's famous because he took a pilgrimage from West Africa all the way to Mecca. He didn't fly, he went on the ground. He went with 60,000 men. 60,000. Out of that 60,000, they say 12,000 were servants. They even say slaves. But when they described those slaves, servants, they said when they came to town, they came in the finest brocade material and silk. 500 of those servants came in a procession like you saw the chiefs come in. They came in single file, all of them having a golden staff, weighed no less than 7 to 8 pounds in gold. Real gold, fine gold, the finest gold that you can find in the world at that time. They would come single file, 500 of them, before the rest of the entourage would come. And it said that all of that splendor and all of that beauty, the writers of that day said what was more sparkling and splendid than the beauty of the material that they wore and the gold that they displayed was the character of their person. There were no arguments. There was no fighting. There was no stealing. There was no looting. No on-the-side bribes. No on-the-side deals. The character was more valuable than the gold they had on the camels in that caravan. Now people come to Ghana and they go back and they say it was very beautiful, but you know what's most beautiful? the personality of the Ghanaian. The smile, the welcome, the hospitality. Meaning in all of those years of exploitation of slavery and colonialism, there's still that spark of character that is inside the Ghanaian personality. Even though all the years of the oppression, there's still something there to be nurtured and worked with. Now this is in the 14th century. This is somewhere around the year 1336, 1332, some say maybe around 1324. Now at that time, what was happening in Europe? One of the most significant pieces of news and information that came out of Europe at that time was the Black Plague. Didn't mean you and I now. There was a pandemic, a disease that killed an estimate of 150 to 200 million Europeans. Devastated their continent. Disease and poor. Now can you imagine a continent having over 150 to 200 million infected people? It makes the coronavirus seem like a sneeze. I'm giving you a picture of Africa in the 14th century in Europe. Here's a man that traveled all his gold to the east. And every one of the people there, the Arabs, and this word reached into Europe. The story of Mansa Musa. Who was this man that had all his gold? Who was this man whose servants had staffs of gold? Who was this man whose slaves were dressed in brocade and silk? What kind of man was he? Where was he from? He said he's from Mali, from West Africa. What's the source of that gold? From Mali, from West Africa. That said every storyteller. That said every explorer wanted to find out the source of that gold. Where did that gold come from? So you had Europeans and Arabs alike wanted to come down to find out the source of gold in West Africa. So right here in Edina, right here in Elmina, Europeans came in the 15th century in search of that gold. They wanted to find out what is the source. They still heard those stories about that gold. So they wanted to find that gold. I mean, it was so prevalent, they forgot the name of all the people in Ghana. They really didn't care about the name of the people in Ghana. They just said, as far as we're concerned, you're Gold Coasters. Because what we're looking for is gold. We're going to rename you. You don't care what your name is, your language is, you're a Gold Coaster. You live where the gold is. So your name is Gold Coaster. Other Europeans came down here, went next door, they named the people after elephant tusks. Ivory Coasters. For elephants there, ivory's there, so you're going to be called after the elephant, ivory. Nigeria was called the slave coast for a while, and then they called the nigger area, which is Nigeria. That's right. Cameroon means shrimp. People in Cameroon were called shrimp, but the first white man saw shrimp bigger than ever saw anywhere else in the world. So they called it shrimp area, Cameroon. Took away all the African identity and renamed all Africans so that our value was no more as human beings, we were valued as commodities. What was on our land? What riches can I get from that land? The people don't count. And if you think that I'm exaggerating, and for some reason maybe I don't like Europeans or something, look at America. When you look at America, you think about the Native American, you think about that it was the people there, you think about the white man. That is the white man's land, the white man's government. There was the people that lived there when he landed there. People that lived there. People whose land it was. But the same European wanted the land, but he didn't want the people. Australia had people there, Aboriginal people there. But Europeans wanted the land, but they didn't want the people. Even we had to have men from the so-called Gold Coast, from the rich culture of the true Ghanaians, had to go to England and plead there with the Aboriginal protection rights. To say that we were a people and we had a land before the white man came here, that helped save Ghana. Because they wanted the land but not the people. I'm saying that to you, your generation, is going to have to fight the challenge because the European powers and Western powers and Asian powers are coming back to Africa, and they want the land, but they don't want the people. And if you're not educated properly to understand where you're at in time and history, you end up, again, being servants and slaves in your own land with foreign powers coming here to develop Mother Africa, Mother Ghana, to give you a job. Because you will not have the sight and the foresight and the preparation to say, we can do for self. If you want to come here and get a job, fine. But we don't need you to come here and make jobs. We can be industrious and make our own jobs for our own people, so we can capitalize on our own wealth. So I wanted to paint that picture, because when someone tells you that you don't have a name, that's what they told us in America, that you had no name that was worth remembering. So I'm giving you a new name: Jack Johnson, Willie James, Wilhelmina James, Michelle Obama, Michelle Johnson. Obama was the African name, but Michelle Johnson. See, no matter how high we reach in society, we were carrying somebody else's identity. And they told us that we had no identity. We had no name. But they knew if we had our names, we could fix ourselves back to our family house, back to our village, back to our land, back to our culture. So even here on the African continent, in order for you to benefit during colonial times, you had to take on a European name. They called it Christian name, but it wasn't Christian, it was European. But the Bible people were Hebrews. They didn't have Christian, they had Hebrew names. And so in that respect, we all had to take on a new identity to satisfy our European so-called masters, who became masters of our faith. And they rob our memory. So I can ask the question, how many of you know who Mansa Musa is, and you can't raise your hand? That is a symptom of memory loss. That's a symptom of collective loss. And somebody has to remind you. So these books that I had here, we had a very great man that was sent to us around the turn of the 21st century called Marcus Mosiah. This book is called The Philosophies and Opinion of Marcus Mosiah. He came to the U.S. from Jamaica. He started an organization called the UNIA, the United Negro Improvement Association. At that time, Negro was a dignified term to call us, because the Europeans and the white man had called us nigger so much that even to be called a Negro was dignified. So he said the Universal Negro Improvement Association. He realized that after being enslaved for so many years, our condition was like the animals of the field, where we would cheat on one another, we would steal from one another, we argue and kill one another. So we need to improve our character in order to be able to stand on the stage with the rest of humanity. So he established this so we would teach each other, school each other, teach each other grooming principles. And he dreamed of doing business together and industry together so we can go back and fight to free Mother Africa, who at that time had not recently been, just recently been divided up at the Berlin Conference in 1884. How many of you heard the Berlin Conference in 1884? The Berlin Conference of 1884. That is the conference where Europeans met in Berlin, Germany. And they decided that Africa is so rich that all of us can enrich ourselves, but we shouldn't fight over and kill each other. Let's have a meeting and divide Africa amongst ourselves and respect those boundaries and share the wealth. So they literally sat down in a meeting for about 2 months, and they drew lines across Africa, and they drew boundaries. The English took some, the French took some, the Germans took some, the Spanish took some, the Portuguese took some. They all got a piece. That's why we speak English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, all these different foreign languages. Because whatever foreigner took over our territory, they made us speak their language and gave us their names. And they further divided the African family. So Marcus Mosiah Garvey decided that he was going to unite us under a black star. That's why Ghana has the black star in our flag. Because when Asante called Dr. Kwame Nkrumah the first president of Ghana, spent 17 years abroad. Part of that was in the United States of America, and he came in contact with the teachings of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He was inspired by those teachings, and he was upset that Marcus Garvey was betrayed, and that ideas had been pushed to the background. He said, if we ever get an independent state in Africa, we have to remember the dream of Garvey. So he put the black star in the flag of Ghana. That's what that black star means and represents. But guess what? The world leaders got together and said, we have to kill this man. This man cannot survive. He's making Africans come together. So they came together and trumped up charges and threw Garvey in jail. He stayed in jail for a number of years until they took him out of jail and deported him from the United States of America back to Jamaica. So he could never come back to the United States again. Eventually, he died in London, broken-hearted, by himself. And his wife put together these writings of his, "The World Will Not Forget Her Husband." Amy Garvey put together these works. So today, you as students, and even I, can read about this great man called Marcus Garvey. We have, this book was written around 1923. We have another book here. This book is The African Origin of Civilization. It's written by Sheikh Anta Diop. We only got it in English around 1975, but the French got it in French around 1955. And because he was Senegalese, he proved to the world that Africans were the first world. And everything you see in civilization today came from the Africans did first. That the Africans were the ones who built ancient Kemet, Egypt, not the Arabs, who are there now. That the Africans belong to ancient Ethiopia. Even the Africans colonized China. Africans first occupied Japan. The first civilization in China was the Qing dynasty. African Kushites organized the Chinese in their first dynamic period and dynasty, and still maintain that culture, African culture. The Japanese today, every Japanese home, they don't have a picture of no European Jesus in their home. They got an altar with their ancestors on it, like Africans do, but they made us ashamed of our ancestors. He wrote this book and documented it all. The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality, because any of our scholars hitherto then, if you said Africans were the first in the world, because that's a myth, it's a lie. He wanted to separate the myth from the lie, and he wrote this book, Sheikh Anta Diop. Then we have our very own Asajimo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Revolutionary Path. He documented all of his movement towards revolution to free Ghana, all of his major speeches, all of his major rallies, all of the conventions, the All-African People's Convention, meetings of Africans all around the world. Africans from all around the world used to come to Accra, like it was Jerusalem, to hear the doctrine of revolution, to hear the doctrine of emancipation, to hear the doctrine of African freedom. But again, world leaders got together and conspired and said he's too dangerous a man. If we have African unity, how can we, the Europeans, live? And what do I mean by that? Even one of the former presidents of France, President Jacques Chirac, said that if France did not own her African colonies, and if France was not allowed to exploit Africa, France would be thrown into a third world country in 24 hours. A current French leader still siphoning the blood from Africa, that they can't live without Mother Africa. And they know that. We don't know that. They make us think that we are a borrowing nation. It's like a thief comes to your house and rob all your riches, and you don't know who he is. And you meet a man on the street, and you don't know he was a thief that came to you. And he said, it looks like you need something to eat. He said, well, I'll loan you some money. You don't even know it's your money that he stole from your house that he's loaning you. And then he said, I'm gonna give it to you on credit. House and giving you your money, and he's lending you your money and charging you interest, and you don't even know it because you don't know you're talking to the thief. That's right. That is the equation. So when you see all of this movement that we see the disciples were trying to do, these powers got together and said, we got to stop this man Because we don't stop this man, you know what's going to happen? Africa is going to get themselves together. Africa is going to start to grow. Africa is going to reach. And more importantly, you know what they're going to do? You know what they're going to do? You know what they're going to do? They're going to remember what we did to them. And see, they think that we think like that. They think that we're going for revenge. They don't know whether we got forgiveness in our heart, compassion in our heart. They don't know. Because when you've done something to somebody, you always carry that guilty conscience that you don't know what the person's going to do when they find out you did it. And that is the same conscience. That's why they left records for us. So we did not have to be in ignorance nor in the dark. These books are not just books, they're flashlights. So you can see in the dark where the light switch is. So you can turn on the light. This is your candle that you can light, that you can see where the flashlight is. It's not just a book. It's knowledge, it's wisdom, and more importantly, it's the light. The Africans that discovered that we were the people of the book. He wrote a book, God, the Black Man, and the Truth. Meaning they lied to us, lied about the black man, and lied about the truth. And we got to go back and research everything is that we've ever been told by these people that call themselves our saviors, but have been our oppressors. Then we have another book, very powerful book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. 12 years ago, they discovered in Mali 100,000 manuscripts that they overlooked. The reason why I say overlooked, because they stole and ravaged all of our ancient cities and capitals and stole the information and brought it back to Europe. And then after 10 years, they get a scholar that say he just discovered something. And what he did was remove the author from our books and put his name on it. And he said he discovered it with information they found in our midst. 12 years ago, the AU, at that time when Thabo Mbeki was the president of South Africa, when we had Abdoulaye Wade was the president of Senegal, Obasanjo, the president of Nigeria, they trusted the French head of state to take those manuscripts to put them in a safe place for translation. Can you imagine that? 100,000 manuscripts in Africa, in Timbuktu, just 12 years ago, on mathematics, astronomy, science, medicine. They thought they had robbed everything from the place. They realized they had left that, and that evidence was there, and we were foolish enough to give it to them again for safekeeping. To prove the kind of mind that we had, the kind of development we had in the arts and sciences of civilization. We were the masters of the arts and sciences of civilization. We taught Europeans when they just in cave coming out of ancient Kemet, Egypt, and Kush, Ethiopia. Become men of learning. And even that, they came at our feet when we were masters, and they were just practitioners. That's why they only practice law. They never mastered it. That's why they only practice medicine. They never mastered it. They're practitioners. They're experimenting on us. We're the guinea pigs. So in that respect, he documents over 6,000 years of Europeans trying to erase the history of the African. This book covers from 4,500 BC up to the year 2000. I'm saying this because sometimes when you talk like this, people say, what is he talking about? Where do you get that information from? He's lying. That's how we've been taught how to think. About 15 years ago, we were celebrating African History Month here in Ghana, and we had an exhibit at UCC. And we had a poster that was hanging with 50 inventions that Africans in America had invented in America. And I overheard the students speaking and said, well, these people only discovered this because they were mingling with the white man. If they hadn't mingled with the white man, they could have never discovered these things or accomplished these things. Fortunately, they said it to my hearing, and I interrupted them. I said, because you have no knowledge of who you are and who we are, you can make such an ignorant statement. We didn't go to the West to learn technology. We brought technology to the West. There was no developed America when the Africans was being taken away from here. Meanwhile, we had so many civilizations that we lost the memory of their number. We got civilizations that can surpass the intelligence of what you see today that we forgot they even ever exist. So we don't know who we were. We brought technology of the day from Africa to the Americas. There's no vocational schools that we went to before you began to be a slave. You got no training. So when you see and look at the history books, these little pieces of paper, they had posters when they were selling us. They changed your name. They say James, a carpenter, 19 years old. Wilhelmina, a seamstress, 17 years old. They got George. He's 22 years old, a blacksmith. Where those skills come from? We had whole villages here that you belong to a wood carving village. Everybody in that village, from the grandfather to the little boy, can carve a stool out of a single piece of wood. Can carve furniture. Till this day, they found that when they met us 500, 600 years ago. Smelting gold with gold trinkets. They found that in us. Master carpenter. We had built kingdoms while they were trying to build states. So we still have the art of building kingdom within our science, within our traditional systems that we are being taught is obsolete, should be marginalized while we adopt these foreign Western systems to govern ourselves. And so we have another book to address that by one of our very own. This is Nana Kobina Nketi Tepe, who wrote this book, African Culture in Governance and Development, the Ghana Paradigm. What do they mean by that? Why would we try to build our new societies based on European structures that don't work for them? Right now, you have going on in the United States of America, the police officer that murdered George Floyd. Right now, today, the criminal trial. The criminal trial to find out whether he's guilty of marrying George Floyd is taking place right now. About 2 hours ago, they called the court to order. And the whole world saw this. But every black man and woman in America of African descent is praying that history of things being visibly seen, being audibly heard, being physically witnessed, but there's no justice. We know that today. So how can we use these Western models as a model for our development when they have not perfected it themselves? How can we say, look at America, look at we in Ghana. Look at UK, look at us in Ghana. You hear that on the radio all the time. Look at America, look at us. America is United States of America is about 246 years old. And they're trying to find out how to exact justice for all their citizens. The United States of America is 246 years old, and 3 months ago, they had these wild insurrectionists storm their capital because they weren't satisfied with the process of election because too many black people voted. 3 months after the election in the United States of America, some of the citizens in the state of Georgia, one of the most racist states in the union, have come up with more than 250 reforms in the voting system to stop people of color from voting. So you want that as your model? Or do you want to see a situation where our systems are examined so that whatever fault was with them, we fix it and move on to the future and perfect it? That's the African model for development. Not saying that we were perfect, but here it is that we got systems that have had 246 years to perfect itself, and there's an unwillingness to want to be perfected. But we still want to associate with it as if it's a model to want to follow. How can we use England as a model? Right now, you got poor people on the streets of England. You got homeless people on the streets of England. You got jobless people on the streets of England. Now here's a country that ruled through colonialism over Ghana, over Nigeria, over Gambia, over Egypt, over Jamaica, over all of these countries, over India, and all their resources, and they're broke today. They got homeless people today. So how can they model for Africa to follow? So what we need to do is study the African system, the African paradigm, find out where we went wrong, find out what mistakes we made, and invest our time in perfecting that our ancestors took thousands of years to develop and to evolve based on our spirit, based on the reality of our own experience, and invest time in what belongs to you and I. That is a subject matter worth studying. And then I have this book. This book is called When We Rule. Because some of us never think that we ever ruled. We think that we always lived in the village, in the bush. People say we're in the jungle. We got people who came in for the year of return and started crying because they thought that they would see people living in trees. They thought they would see people eating without fork and knife, and no plates. They thought they'd see people living just in mud huts. They had no idea that, yes, me too, we have everything the world has. We have poor, rich, and everything in between. But what we have is our own. And this book documents all the civilizations before the Europeans came into their own global world power. See, we need a book of remembrance that we can remember that we had a past that was as glorious as anybody else's past. And this is why we know that the term return was more than a plane ride. It was more than landing at the airport. The return was returning back to the interest, the knowledge, and the science of who it is that we are ourselves. Because you can't return to something that you don't even remember. It's like you forget something and you go outside and you turn back in the house. Maybe young people don't experience it, the older people know what I'm talking about. And you go back in the house and you forgot what you were looking for when you get in there. Then you gotta stand still in the middle of the room. What did I come back here for? You don't even know what you came back in the house for. You couldn't remember. Well, that is our state. When we say return, some of our people don't even remember what we talk about returning to. So they return back to just having a good party, getting drunk, having a nice time, revelry, and all of that. But they think that's the return. That's not the return. But in order to return back to ourselves, we have to understand what existed before it was destroyed. And then add value to that and see that that is worth seeking. See, the word return also has in the Bible, the word return is shuvah. And the Greeks in the New Testament turned that word return to repent. Repent has a connotation that suggests that you left God and went astray. And it means return back to God, which is your center. That's what shuvah means. It means literally in English, it means return. And hashuvah means the return. But the return is like sankofa. Go back and fetch it. Go back to the point that you went astray. Fetch that essence, now go forward. Not back to go back. We're not talking about going back to the 14th century, 13th century, or BC. We're talking about we left something that's of value and worth. Let's take that thing and let it be the essence of how we go forward. So with that, there's a whole lot to be said, but like I said the first time, we can't say it all in one piece, but otherwise you have a problem digesting it. You see a buffet meal, you want everything there, but sometimes you can't eat everything there. You gotta take what you can eat, otherwise you leave food on the plate and you waste it. So in that respect, I just want us, before I call on our beloved brother to give us also what he has to present, I want us to observe standing one moment of silence for all the brothers and sisters that have lost their lives in the U.S. that are commemorated in the spirit of George Floyd since his trial. The trial, after they killed him, is on trial now, and our people are seeking justice there. I want us in solidarity to observe one moment of silence, that our ancestors in the spirit of Almighty God will hear our cry and our petition for justice. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you very much, and for lending your ears. And I hope that at least you gain something small to take back with you, and you're happy that you've been here.
Wow. Can we do that better? So, this is it. How do you like it? This is amazing. So, the return is not just for us to return to maybe 500 years ago, or maybe when we used to, cook with some, the return is return to the good stuff. That's we made to believe we're bad stuff, and as a result, we find ourselves in this predicament. I hope you all understand that. But we're not saying that. So we're going to return now. On Sunday, the accident can was it. We have to create. Never. The power pay your one. Was it what I die? I brought people to I am from one of what one. And see, return to the young people. I put an air for the brother. More than if you just only use I have a respect discipline. Or society. They are producers say. Now, what I die and well, why and put that maybe I as a lamb. So they are creating. Never put an air for the other. Now, if you do that, who may wait to make a see a man. We can thank you. This is amazing. I've learned online history for more than 27 years, but I seem to always get something new. Thank you so much. Well, before we have our priest and priestess speak, briefly we'll call on Mrs. Amabawa to give an official response to Rabbi's presentation. Mrs. Amabawa is a director for the Africa Emergency Management Center, and also a very powerful voice on radio.
Thank you very much, Madam. Rabbi, thank you. Now, I sat listening to Rabbi and looking at us here, listening to the bits of conversations that were going on. I told myself, we need a total overhaul, a total soulish, spiritual, mental overhaul. And I think that is exactly what Rabbi is doing. And as I listened to him, of course, Rabbi made a lot of references to the Bible. And I remember a very popular story in the Bible where the Chronicle said that Moses now had to meet the children of Israel to tell them of what God wanted them to do. Deuteronomy chapter 6, the verse 6 says, this is what Moses said. And these words which I command you today shall be in your hearts. 7%. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And as Rabbi charged us, I felt he was talking to us individually. That today I'm standing here singularly and I want thousands of voices when I'm gone. Charge your children to return. We are very grateful. Now, there are a number of significant statements that Rabbi made, that we are the future of our youth. It's quite interesting. That seems like a reversal of what we know, that we are the future of our youth. The investment we are making, no matter the acres of lands and other properties we buy, if you refuse to invest in our youth, when we are dead and gone, we will not have them to carry out any mantra. And for me, the books right on this table speaks volumes. One rabbi was charging us that you don't know Master Musa. You seem to not have heard anything of him, but almost every one of you is holding a phone. So what do you know? When we open the books, what we read, when we get to the classrooms, what kind of conversations do we normally give ourselves to? Rabbi talked about the deception that had gone on for so long, to the extent that everything African is bad, it's negative, it's black. To the extent that we seem to have the African enforcing or reinforcing these negativities. When somebody lies to say, you see the Ghanaian, you see the African. When somebody is giving you time, the person would have to now re-emphasize that GMT are not talking about Ghana man time. I said 3 o'clock. That's really sad. And this evening, I feel strongly that we are all being charged. And not because we say we are being gingered to return. And it's important for us to pick all these. Rabbi also said the year of return was more than people just coming from abroad and visiting tourism sites. He said the deception that went on was not just perpetrated to people in the diaspora, but people that were also left in this continent. And it is a plea for us to go back to pick the virtues that we have left as a people. That we are not as black as we are being made to believe. If we look at everything that is happening around us, we seem to be confused. We seem to have metamorphosed into something that we can't even describe ourselves. Return. And then, as he was getting close to the end of his remarks, he says, of all the years of oppression and looting of the continent, people come back to the continent of Ghana, and they leave with impressions of the Ghanaian hospitality. The smiles. It means that they did not completely succeed. It means that there is still a flicker of light for us to lift up and shine what is left in us. And I believe that as students, as a people, this is a charge for us. We are not just going to keep it. The seeds have already been sown. We are going to water it. We are going to watch over them to germinate. And we are going to spread out for people to catch it. Rabbi, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Samabawa. It's always so refreshing to hear from a very excellent individual, an example of the African woman, with all the grace and everything. Thank you, Mama. Family, we now are going to hear from our guests who came all the way from New York to be part of this program. We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, wherever. I would like to apologize to our audience, mostly online, for the delay. You know, I think we are running almost an hour late, and especially the president of African Global Chamber of Commerce in Chicago, my brother Olivier Ramsey. I'm sorry, I know you're waiting to speak with us. We appreciate you, honor you. We will really you to be more patient with us. And just to ginger us a little bit, I will now call on the Associate Dance Institute.
small. Yeah, come Really?
This is us. This is us.
Read the batteries go down behind.
Thank you very much, Assisi. Ladies and gentlemen, at this very moment, this is a very solemn moment. We are going back to our own selves. We are going to hear from two wonderful individuals from New York, from the Strand of Ma'at, Harlem, New York. They are going to share with us kinetic physics, how we kinetic science about gravity, how we used to live as a people back then. They are going to share with us our spirituality, who we were before when we built all this wonderful civilization. Now, I introduce to you Dr. Anika Jabari and Mr. Jabari Osani. Wonderful couple, all the way from New York.
Thank you so much, Madasi. I would like to begin by thanking the Divine Mother, Father, Creator for allowing me the grace to see another day. The ancestors for guiding my purpose. Thank you to all of the elders here and the Nana Noon, particularly Nana Obakesi Ampa the first, Abatahen of this great state of Asebu, Nana Kamana Kra the second, and Nana Kotwo Etuakwa the fifth, our chief of the wonderful village of Atonkwa. We have been welcomed here today, and we're so blessed to be able to talk to all of you today. As the co-chief priest of the Shrine of Ma'at, I am honored to be here among such distinguished guests. My full name is Hemet Ter and Tafi, Ifrika Ma'at, also known as Dr. Rika Daniels Osage. And at this time, I don't know how I follow Rabbi Cohen, especially after he borrowed most of my speech. Just kidding.
Lending it to me.
But I will say that the message is very similar. What is the meaning of the return? The return is an opportunity to rebuild our relationships across the diaspora. For too long, we have allowed outsiders to determine our destiny. We have allowed colonizers to dictate how we live, how we work, how we socialize amongst each other, and how we worship with each other. The return has reminded us that our families must be prepared, that we must not only see the return as a physical manifestation of our connection, but also a mental and spiritual one. We must do what our ancestors would be proud of, which is to become whole again, to embrace our identity, to not only have strong self-esteem, but even stronger race esteem. Love of who you are, love of who we are. You can't truly have powerful self-esteem without positive race esteem. We must also work together across the diaspora to be economically self-sufficient as a people once again, to conduct business together, to support one another, to view ourselves as one African people with many beautiful African cultures and traditions. As an educator whose role is to encourage and assist young women and men with their career development, I am excited and encouraged to see so many young people here. It is important for you to witness the unity amongst diasporic Africans and to be a part of this journey. I look forward to assisting with the development of Obakesi University of Excellence and supporting the Cape Coast Technical University Skills Training Program. As a linguist, I understand the importance of the need to return to our original languages in order to rebuild our communication with each other. But even more so as a priest, I know that we must return to our original spiritual traditions to strengthen our soul. That is why I began this speech by acknowledging the divine Mother, Father, Creator. As a Kemetic priestess, I honor both the feminine and the masculine aspects of the divine force, because there is no one without the other. We must honor the woman again and recognize her place in spirituality, just as we have honored the man. We carry these symbols with us as priests of the Shrine of Ma'at. The symbol is called the Ankh. It is a symbol of everlasting life. When you look at this symbol, it looks quite similar to what you may have seen in other traditions. But what is missing is the feminine aspect of what you have seen. So here the Ankh is one of the original symbols, where the top part represents the womb of the woman. The bottom part represents the male counterparts, and the two united provide the offspring, you, today in the audience. So this symbol represents familyhood, unity, and the tradition of a divine force that recognizes both the man and the woman. We need to return to these traditions. African spirituality has always acknowledged the place of both man and woman. And this is what I wanted to bring to you today as a message to all of us to honor ourselves, to honor our souls, to honor our ancestors. Remember who they are. Don't be afraid to call on your ancestors. We've been made to believe that speaking to our ancestors is some kind of unusual process. That now that they're no longer here, we should no longer acknowledge them. That is false. That is a tradition that is not our own. Without our ancestors, we would not be here today. To recognize that we're really here to continue what they have started. That we still have work to do. We need to complete the unfinished work. And yes, at altars, we need to have altars wherever we are. I altar not just in my home, but in my place of work. And on my altar, I acknowledge my ancestors. I acknowledge the divine force in all of its components, in all of its parts. So I ask all of you to do the same. I ask all of you to start rebuilding your altars, because rebuilding your altars will help you rebuild your soul and help us to continue to rebuild
welcoming, and I'm sure that those people who gave birth to the people, who gave birth to the people, who gave birth to the people, who, let's go a little further, gave birth to us, actually would have known. And I'm going to say to you, though, that term is Ankh. Say Ankh with me. Uja Seneb. Wonderful. You have just said life, strength, and health. And of course, you would want to greet your family members by giving them everlasting life, by giving them strength and giving them health. And so that is one of the things that we have said and will need to continue to say. Because we are now at the place where it is going to be critically important for us to remember who we are so that we. Now, let me say to you that as a person that's coming to you from New York City, the place where many people would believe the center of the world finance exists. Some folks, even folks that look like us, would say you're going from the developed world to the undeveloped world. That's the kind of thing that you hear people say. And in fact, even people like us say that. And I must say that they've gotten it wrong. I beg to differ. In many ways, I am coming from the scene of the crime. The place where millions of us were stolen and forced to toil for hundreds of years, disconnecting us from our homeland. And I'm returning to the seat of civilization, the seat of humanity. That is what this journey is. That is what the return is. And so as I come back here, I know that there is so much about me, about us, that I have to learn, and that we have to learn. And so as I do this, I want to guide you in a bit of a meditation. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes in a minute. I'm going to say a few words. Now, we're not going to ask you what came to mind. It's going to just be for you. And in that sense, this means that you can be completely honest with yourself. Just recognize, acknowledge the images that come to mind when I say these words. Are you ready? Wonderful. Let's close our eyes. Doctor. Who do you, when I say the word doctor? What's the image that comes to mind? Where do they work? What do they look like? How do they sound? Scientist. When you hear the word scientist, what image comes to mind? Who do you see? How do they look? How do they sound? Where do they actually spend their time? Philosopher. When you hear the word philosopher, what are the images that come to mind? Who are the individuals that you think of? And finally, I want to say head of state. When I say head of state, I'm talking about somebody who is in control of everything. Head of state. What comes to mind? Who comes to mind when you think of the term head of state? Okay, you can open your eyes. Now remember, this was just for you, right? This is just for you. And I've done these kinds of things with students in the United States, in other places. Let me say to you that often when I say those words, and I say them in rooms filled with people that are like us, sometimes the students, even though they have not been prodded to tell us what they're thinking, they turn to me and say, I hear doctor. I find myself thinking of a European person. Then I have to fix it in my head. Let me say to you, it is wonderful that at least they are trying to fix it. That programming that we have received is something that can be unlearned, but we have to recognize the programming. Now, history students, I want to ask you a few questions about those things. When I say doctor, who would you say might have been one of the world's earliest doctors? Does anyone have an answer for me? Is there a name that you think of as the first doctor? No names? I see students in the back talking, but they're afraid to actually give their answer. Tell us what you're thinking. They were like, this is the person he's thinking of. I saw that look because I've had that look before. Let me say to you that when we think about doctors, it is irrefutable that the first doctors did their work in this land, on this continent. And in fact, some of you, let's see if you've heard of the name. I'm going to give a name that many of you might know if you've studied this. Some of you might have heard the name Imhotep. Let's see if, has anyone heard the name Imhotep? Let's see your hands. Come on. Let's see you doing this. Come on, put your hand up. Let's see your hands. This means we have more work to do. That's what this means. But you should know that Imhotep was what we would often call a multi-genius. He was a doctor, he was an engineer, he was very similar to a vice chair of the state of Canada. I'm going to talk about Canada in a second. And so Imhotep was a very powerful person. It is believed that he wrote a medical journal that had over 200 cures to illnesses on the journal. In fact, when you go to the hospital today, if you say that you are ill, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to check your vitals, right? Who's had their vitals checked? Maybe they'll check your pulse, your temperature. Do you know that the first description of the pulse is something that Africans described? Imhotep calls it a tiny river that goes to and fro. And he says, check this tiny river to see if someone is gravely ill. Something that is done in hospitals all over the world. A process that you might think people who do not look like us brought to the world. You must understand that it is our parents, our mothers and fathers that gave this to the world. And I don't want to only give you a name of a male doctor. Did you know that there were early female doctors? Who knew that? Who's heard of the name of Lady Procession? Please say Lady Procession with me. Lady Procession. She is perhaps the earliest, one of the earliest doctors. She was a contemporary. She worked alongside Imhotep. She's one of the world's earliest doctors. A woman. You heard Dr. Anika Daniels-Osaze talk about the fact that in ancient Africa, we recognize the power of both men and women. And that is what we see. That is what we see. How about when I talk about scientists? Did anyone see people that look like themselves in this space? Did you see someone that looked like you? You can raise your hand if you did. No? I want you to think about the fact that the world's first scientists were African. In fact, I'm not going to go all the way back into the ancient world. I know right now I'm looking at students wearing masks right now because we are in the middle of a global pandemic. And I want to actually tell you really something that you might not know. Some people actually have seen that the place where I have traveled from, the United States, has had the worst pandemic of anyone else in the world. And so they've been talking about developing vaccines. Can I say something to you? Do you know who brought the actual science of vaccines to the... This is a story that most of us know. An enslaved African who was taken from where? From Ghana. Was enslaved in Boston. Pandemic. Many people had died. Tens of thousands of people in Boston. And because they had enslaved people, our ancestors who were enslaved, they didn't want to touch the bodies, right? They wouldn't touch those bodies. What did they do? They said, well, you're a slave, you have to take care of the bodies. Because we know that when we spend time with our relatives who have died, some of us contract smallpox. Guess what happened? They began to realize that these enslaved Africans didn't get smallpox. So the man who owned a number of enslaved Africans, a man named Cotton Mather, don't say his name again because I do not care where he is. A man named Cotton Mather spoke to an enslaved African. An enslaved African whose name was Onesimus. Say Onesimus with me. We must say our ancestors' names in order for them to continue to live. Onesimus says, well, the reason why y'all are dying is because you don't know what we do in West Africa. We take some of the material in the pustules, the bumps that people get with smallpox. We mix it together, we leave it in the sun so we know that it won't harm someone. We make a small incision on someone's arm, and we put it inside the arm. Those people will not get it. So that while we have companies that are valued at trillions of dollars creating these medicines, it was an enslaved African from Ghana that brought that science to the New World and gets absolutely no credit for it. This is not their science, it's our science. We were the world's first doctors and scientists. Let me just talk about a philosopher quickly and then I'll come to a close. Anyone have an idea what the world's first book is? The first book. Anybody want to make a guess? I want you to know, I know some of you probably thought I was going to say the Bible. Who said they were going to say the Bible? Somebody thought that, right? Come on now, somebody was thinking that. I want you to know that there are sections of the Bible that come from an earlier text. A series of texts that Africans in this land called Kemet, this land that unfortunately we know as Egypt today, these Africans wrote the world's first text. The earliest one is known as the Maxims of Ptah-Hotep. Please tell someone say Ptah-Hotep with me. Say the name. Ptah-Hotep. One of the world's earliest philosophers wrote the world's earliest complete book. And one of his compatriots, someone that wrote a book around the same time, a man named Amenemop. Say Amenemop with me. Amenemop's book called The Instructions of Amenemop makes up a good chunk of the biblical book of Proverbs. Did you hear what I just said? Did you hear what I just said? That there are earlier texts written by Africans that are now in that book. In fact, if you look at the new version, it's called the NVT, I believe, the new version of the Bible, it actually says this comes from Amenemop. I want you to know that I am extremely excited to be here with you today. Because as a historian, and I know that when Africans actually join together, when we get things that we think we can say negative about each other, when we get those things that people have said about us that have been keeping us apart, there is nothing that the African cannot do. And I'm not just being hopeful, I'm telling you that because there was nothing that this world benefits from today that we didn't do. When Africans from all over the world get together with our brothers and sisters who are on the continent, we will once more be the most powerful people in the world. And as I look at a wonderful grouping of beautiful, intelligent historians who are budding, who are learning, I know that these stories are stories that you will tell to our children so they understand who they are. So when they look in the mirror, they see the creators of civilization. And as we understand who we are, we will once more be at the forefront of human civilization. As I say goodbye to you, here's a phrase I'd like to give you. I want to say that when someone is leaving someone they care about, in the ancient world, they would have said, Shem Emhetep. Say Shem Emhetep with me. It means go forth in peace. Have a wonderful day, have a wonderful life. And those are all things that I want for you, that I need for you. Because your work will solidify the work of our people for thousands and thousands of years. Shem Emhetep. Shem Emhetep.
Thank you very much, my brother, Mr. Jabari Osazi, the High Priest at the Art Shrine, Harlem, New York, USA. Thank you, thank you. We can't wait to have a shrine there in Cape.
That's right.
As I said,
That's right. That's right.
thank you, thank you. Can you give him a better round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, we will now invite the president of the Global African Chamber of Commerce.
I hope you can hear me. Akwaba, His Majesty Nana Obokise, King of Asebo Traditional Area, keynote speaker, Rabbi Cohen Halevi, Executive Director of PanAfricanism Foundation, Chief Nana Kwamina Kra II, Director of Obokise University, Mayor of Cape Coast, Mr. Kwado Oduakwa of Akwamuhen Edina Traditional Area, Ghana, Mrs. Ama Bawa, Director of Emergency and Disaster Management, Dr. Anika Daniels Osaze, Chief Priest, and all distinguished speakers and the guests. It's my honor and the privilege to be with you here in Chicago afternoon, here in Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. My name is Olivier Kamanzi. I'm Africa Diaspora Development Institute, ADDI, Banking and Finance Director. Also, I'm a chairman of Africa Global Chamber of Commerce, based here in Chicago, in the same time operating across 47 African nations on the continent. Also, I'm a self-employed entrepreneur. I'm an investment banker by profession. I have an investment firm based here in Chicago. We invest, we provide funding to projects across the continent of Africa. I'm really pleased to be with you this afternoon, not to talk about my business, but to talk about us, Africans in diaspora. Talk about ADDI, background, the updates. Specifically, I have been asked to give you the update related to the implementation of the Wakanda City of Return, Cape Coast, Ghana project as far as funding of this project. My dears and sisters, let me start by quoting the Ghana first president, Kwame Nkrumah, when on May 1963, at the foundation of the Organization of the African Unity, and he said this: with capital controlled by our own financial institutions and banks, harnessed to our own rules and our own true industrial and agricultural development, we shall make our advance. My dears, brothers and sisters, today, almost 60 years later, Africa does not control its economy, let alone the financial sector. Kwame Nkrumah's dream is yet to be realized. At this moment, allow me to sincerely thank our leader, Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chiwombori Kwao, for her vision to create ADDI with the mission to connect African diaspora and the continent to achieve the African we want, built by us and for us. ADDI was created with the spirit to accomplish the dream of Kwame Nkrumah and other African founding fathers. Wakanda City of Return, Cape Coast, Ghana is one of the flagship projects of ADDI. Wakanda City of Return at Cape Coast is a smart city and a multi-asset urban sustainable development one-stop center of excellence. The proposed investments aim to create an African diaspora center of excellence designed to train and build the international capacity needed to build Africa through the reversal of the brain drain out of Africa. Due to massive exodus of Africans' workforce through the brain drain that has occurred over the past 400 years, the plan is to start the development of each African region through the building of an African Diaspora Center of Excellence called Wakanda Smart Cities. These Wakanda Smart Cities will be built across the continent of Africa for training and the building the needed intellectual capacity, starting with the Wakanda City of Return in Cape Coast, Ghana, located in the West African region, in the West Ghana region. For the development and implementation, the project has secured around 35,000 acres of land divided into Wakanda sites in Asebu, Kwamankese, and Asebu, Apewo, Sika, and across coastal area on the ocean. The proposed investments aims at building a smart city ecosystem that focuses on training, intellectual capacity, building hotels, establishing an agricultural programs and the facility pre-constructions, improving current infrastructure, and the building a new infrastructures in partnership with the City of Cape Coast, the government of Ghana, Cape Coast University, Cape Coast Technical College, Cape Coast Marine Academy, Cape Coast Nursing and the hospital, building shopping centers, and the construction of the African Diaspora Residential Village, and many more. My dear sisters and brothers, I have to thank you because this year, on January 4th and the 5th, a team of ADDI that have been privileged to lead, comprised of engineers, investment bankers, lawyers, came to Cape Coast to identify the needs, to make sure what are financial and technical needs you have. Make sure we open our first new office of ADDI, hire a local team, and most importantly, link with our Ghanaian brothers and sisters. When the team came back to US and the UK, reported back to ADDI leadership. Today, my dear brother and sister, I can report back to you that the African diaspora has been able to raise the important seed money needed to really have a necessary funds we need to build Wakanda City of Return of Cape Coast. We are today in a position to start implementing the Wakanda City of Return Cape Coast region. We, diaspora, and also our technical team on ground is busy working to implement the Wakanda City of Return. And I'm pleased also to let you know the funds will be available in the few months to make sure we hire massive workforce in Cape Coast, also across Ghana, to make sure the dream of Wakanda movie becomes a reality. You can see, touch, enjoy, and have a legacy of Africans. The Wakanda City of Return at Cape Coast will become a model that will be duplicated elsewhere on the continent of Africa. I can tell you other countries have really now started reaching out to us to ask us to implement the same model, the Ghanaian or Cape Coast model, across the continent of Africa. We have currently the 2 countries that also are really interested to start Wakanda City, smart cities in their respective countries. We call upon you. This cannot be achieved without the people of Ghana. I have to give you a big thanks for receiving us when we were there in January. We met several people, key stakeholders, the Cape Coast University, especially the people from the kingdom of Asebo Kingdom, who facilitated, who hosted us. Now we can say we are very truly connected. Diaspora is now connected with Ghanaian people. We are ready to work with you. We can tell you what happened in a few weeks ago has never happened before in diaspora. This is what happened. Within 2 days, diaspora has been able to raise money that has never been raised before. So we can tell you right now, we have money. We are ready to come to build Wakanda City of Return, the first project that will be a model for the remaining or the rest of African continent. We in diaspora, we have a capacity in terms of technical resources, also financial resources to build Africa. But it's not enough if we don't connect. As you know, one finger cannot lift much, but 5 fingers can lift a whole village. If we work together, we achieve what our founding fathers have always dreamed to do. We are so excited with the leadership of Arikana, Dr. Arikana Chiombori Kwao, and His Majesty Nana Obokise. This initiative of Wakanda City of Return is a reality today. Once again, thank you. Thank you for listening to me. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you. I will be back to Ghana, to Cape Coast very soon. Once again, thank you and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
I think this week was done to people like Murphy and all the celebrities, all our big people in the US, the diaspora. They have applied their support. And Her Excellency, Ambassador of the Crown, has led this. Okay. You know, I can tell you, monies have been raised for this project to start. Also, something very beautiful happened. As a young guy who built a car by himself, his name is Calvin. Yes, somehow it's gotten to API, and we are in the process of raising money to build a car assembly plant right at Akroma Assembly. are going to happen. It's not like next 2 years or, you will see this since beginning from August. The Operation University of Excellence is going to host this plant. And we also have an agreement with Cape Coast University. We're starting a farm there, 30-acre farm greenhouse. We are looking to start models, to start stuff that will change the way we think, the way we do things, stuff that will take us to where we used to be to move us forward. I'm also happy to announce that at the memorial, you're going to see a lot of help from ADI. We are very excellent health insurance was here with us about a week ago, and we planned everything. Now you have the very first ADI club, campus club. Give yourself a round of applause. By being members of this very wonderful club, you are representing Her Excellency Ambassador Overhaul at your various schools, at your various communities. So what she stands for is what you have to preach. We have to be honest to ourselves. Her Excellency has given more to Africa than any other human being I know right now. She has sacrificed for us. And, it's difficult to always tell the truth, but she stands by the truth. So as young people, you have to know that you always stand by the truth, no matter how difficult it is. If you're a member of the ADI club at IE, you are a member of the true society. So stand by the truth all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, I know a lot has been said, a lot has been done here. We've seen wonderful dances. We've had wonderful speeches. It is now time to hear from our special guest of honor to give us a closer remark, and then we will have refreshments. The students will have to go, so they will serve you packs. And I can promise you the food is very good. I tried it. So, with a round of applause, let's welcome Nana Kojo Idwaka, the Attorney of Agriculture area.
Thank you, Nana Obokasi. All too soon, we have come to the end of the program. And it's been a wonderful evening. We've heard from speakers like Rabbi Kohen explaining what the return is all about. And we have also heard from the chief priest and the priestess about cabbage and what it also stands for. It's been a wonderful evening, as I said earlier on. And we want to thank everybody here, especially those at the high table, for sitting in this program. But also not forgetting the students that came all the way from Agri. They've been here with us. I want to thank all of you for making time for this afternoon's program. Thank you very
much. It's important for you. After one of our great Amosa people who have been here with us throughout, the person of Mr. Graham Anderson, CEO of Highland Coast Hotel Arena. Also, Honorable Naomi Ajay Assembly 1, Upper Scale. Also, we have with us this man who is trying to elevate poverty from Central Region. Honorable Overhaul, CEO, President of the Community. And also the leader of Associate Dance Institute, Nana Bakan, and Agra Pusiao. If you are here, join us around. And now to the most important person here today. You know who that person is? It is you. Give yourself a round of applause. As we dance into, give us some music while food is served, and then you call it a day. God bless you for coming. This is your host. Thank you very much. Madam Hamilton, thank you very much. Thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you. Rabbi, thank you. God bless you. God bless you. And it's a God to Jabari. Madam Maya Kusuru.